And hello, this is Chris Parker with the Business Simplicity Podcast. And this conversation is Kevin Flood. And I worked with Kevin for many years at LeasePlan, initially with a data center project. And what we talk about is really the origin story of his career, starting in automotive trade, going all the way through information technology, eventually to compliance and privacy and security for top corporations in the UK and the world. Um, Fascinating story, very human, lot of advice for people going through their career right now. So hey, Kevin, why would this be super valuable for people to listen to it?
I think it shows you can have a really great career no matter where you start from, no matter what you think you can or can't do. You can get a result that you can be very surprised by.
The Business Simplicity Podcast, where we learn about strategies and tactics to succeed through simplicity, with your host, Chris Parker.
And welcome back to the Business Simplicity Podcast. This is Chris Parker, and I'm having a conversation with Kevin Flood, who I've known for a couple of decades. And then we've had quite some adventures together. We're going to get into how those adventures happened. And since he's recently retired, I was just eager to be able to pick his brain a little bit on, looking back, what are the lessons maybe that he picked up on the way, and maybe some advice for even the next generation as things in the world continue to change and maybe get more stressful. I would like to give Kevin probably the biggest credit for this podcast even to be in existence, because Kevin was, in my mind, was the first person who mentioned the word podcast in the halls of LeasePlan when we were working there, and got me down the path and made some recommendations. And Kevin, thank you for that. So
Well,
um, Kevin and I met, I want to say around 2001, 2002, when we were organizing a team for LeasePlan to build the data center in what became Ireland. We didn't know. I think early on we didn't know if it was going to be really. We didn't know what it was going to be or where it was going to be. We know we had a mission to do,
or
and
if it was going to be even.
yeah, and it had to evolve from there. And but maybe Kevin, if you want to start a little bit, because you ended your career, as I want to say like head of security, head of privacy for FTSE 100 company, so very into privacy, security, cyber at a highly regulated, extremely professional in environment. But that's not where you started. So I'm curious if you can share a little bit, like,
A long way from my
time
start.
time before you met up with Chris. Who
Yeah.
was Kevin at that point, and then how did our paths
Um,
cross?
well, Kevin started off leaving school to be an apprentice motor mechanic, which is a vast sort of gap from where he ended up. Yeah, it was a bit of a funny journey, really. It usually involves something that there's a problem and that needs solving, and nobody else either wants to do it or not interested or doesn't want to touch it with a barge pole or something like that. And I spent probably the first 20 years of my career actually in the motor trade. So I went through sort of college for motor vehicle technician, which then was an engineering job, and you did a proper college, I suppose the equivalent of a kind of a degree for it. And then I went into management within the motor trade. Um, I took a weird turn then. I actually went to work for Zastava UK, which I don't know if you've ever heard of the Yugo brand.
Oh yeah.
Yep. I worked for the UK importer for them for quite a while
Okay.
because I had the opportunity to set up a model dealership. So on the site where the importer was, they put their own showroom, their own workshops to sell the franchises out to the rest of the dealer network and things like that. So, and had the chance to put a computer system in for stock control. So we're talking 80s now, and you had like an Amstrad PC with a dial-up modem and stuff like that to order parts and that sort of thing. So that was my first kind of touch of the IT side of it a little bit. It was always an interest, and when I left school, you didn't really have computers and such things at school. We just got over abacuses, really, I think, around that time, logarithm tables and that sort of stuff. So, I mean, after I left there, I went into the car leasing business, and I went to work for Hertz Leasing in London. As a friend of mine that I knew through working at the Ford dealerships and stuff, and I went into the operations side of maintenance budgeting and that sort of thing. So you just took your knowledge of the motor trade and a little bit of computer knowledge and just a way of sort of getting into the business side of things. That was a bit of a drag because I was traveling up to London every day, which is, if anybody knows the difference between Reading and London, it's not the best way to travel every day by car or whatever. So an opportunity came to work for LeasePlan in Windsor. And so I took that opportunity, which was the sort of start of all what became in the end. And probably after I've been there a couple of years, there was a change of CEO, and Vahid became the CEO. And my direct boss was Howard Thomas, who was an acquired taste, but Howard liked me, so that was great for me. So Howard also had an interest in IT, so we kind of were a bit kindred spirits. We ended up looking at different types of IT potential systems and bits and pieces that could help with the operational side of the business. And off my own bat, I had a look at, we had some sort of green screen systems that we didn't have any sort of mapping systems or any way we could push people into volume related bonus kind of suppliers and that sort of thing. So I went to see Phil Parker, who we all know, and he said, well, that seems a good idea, but I haven't got anybody who can do it, but I've got some budget. So he said, do you want to have a crack at it? So I thought, yeah, okay. So I managed to find a Delphi programmer that could program a map system, and we're talking way before Google Maps and all that sort of stuff. And I managed to hook it into the AS400 systems, and the maintenance controllers could send people into the nearest dealer and that sort of stuff. And actually, LeasePlan spun that off as a product called, I think it was called Service Direct in the end. And I got absolutely no money out of that at all, but there you go. And Tim Shoebridge, who was working in there as IT operations manager at the time, he sort of saw something there that was a problem-solving situation. He had a lot of problems with IT support across help desks and all that sort of stuff. So he said, do you want to have a go at that? So I said, okay, we'll give that a bit of a crack. I've kind of missed a bit, actually. I forgot about the bit with Fazale as well, where I spent quite a while doing a system that we bought in from Belgium to act as a back office system for Fiat Auto contracts. And somebody somewhere within the organisation decided that we would try and convert the Australian system into a UK system. But it was probably so different that you wouldn't believe it. It was almost impossible. And I think you probably had a little look at that as well. There's a potential for a new system at some point, and that was a complete disaster. We would have been better off taking the Belgian system, translating it into English and using that. But we got that delivered. And then I ended up, as I just said, working for Tim, looking at IT support and operations across the UK. Around that time, we had a merger with Dial Contracts, which was kind of a little bit fractious at times, where there was still two CEOs and all this, that, and the other. So, and once the EuroDC project started, which is the thing me and Chris worked on, Tim Shoebridge initially went onto the project, sang its praises, etc. And I thought, with a few overtures from Chris here and there, every time he popped in, I kind of threw my hat into the ring with that, and I suppose the rest is history. You can probably pick the rest of it up from there, Chris.
The rest is history, and maybe we'll talk a bit about that. But when you were in school before working for the Yugo importer, what did you imagine you would do in your career? Like, did you have a
I worked at the Ford dealer initially for years. My dad was very much into cars and stuff like that. And that was where I got the interest in that, which I've still got, because obviously still got the 1929 car and all that sort of stuff. That's one of the big passions still. But no, that was what I really wanted to do. I wanted to be a recording engineer.
A recording engineer, like music recording engineer.
That's what I wanted to do. But I was told by the careers person, you're too thick, you haven't got the brains to do that sort of stuff, which I hear that all the time now from younger people, where they're told by their careers advisor, teacher, or whatever, that you can't do that because you're from there, you've got this amount of brain power. That's what you can do. So you kind of think to yourself, well, this person's a teacher, they know what they're talking about, I'll go and do the other thing that I like, is working in the motor trade. So a lot of people's dreams get shattered by people like that, I'm afraid.
I literally have never had that feedback, but I don't think I've ever sought feedback on what do I think.
Well, it's quite common in schools here to have a careers teacher or a careers advisor, and a lot of them, I think, take it's kind of an add-on to their normal job, and I don't think it's taken as seriously as it should be. My school background is, in this country, there was two systems. You had the grammar school system, where you passed a certain exam at 11 called the 11 plus, which took you into the grammar school system, which was the more sort of more intelligent, better educated people, apparently. But I went through the secondary modern route, which is supposed to have been one of the biggest educational disasters ever, the British secondary modern system. But when I look around, there's an awful lot of people from secondary modern schools in quite good positions throughout the country, etc. So that's kind of, you were a little bit forgotten, if you like, in terms of they just tick the boxes a lot of the time, and I think that's a lot of a failure in
so education. I'm going after, what was the decision making process? Because when I talk to, and it's probably terrible advice, but when I talk to young people, when I have the chance, they're trying to think about their major or their direction. In the Netherlands, you need to choose those things quite young, 12, 13, you kind of start slotted into these things.
Right.
And my feedback is, it makes very little difference, actually, because what you'll probably end up doing multiple times in your career is changing things fundamentally anyways. So what I really champion is an education where you learn how to learn, you learn how to deal with the red tape, and you learn how to deal with the politics and bullshit. And then you can learn on the way. So how did you go down that path of starting out in the very practical, hands-on automotive trade, and sort of be seduced into IT eventually, and then you got seduced again into compliance and security and privacy? So there's been kind of this.
Honest truth, I went into IT when I was 39 because of that system that was needed to do a job. And I kind of thought, well, I've got the various bits of knowledge and maybe logic to deliver this thing, and then became really interested in it. And then thought, well, I can branch off into other things now. And a lot of the time is there's a challenge, and I kind of fancy the challenge. I can't really keep doing the same thing over and over again for years, because it just drives me around the bend and I can't do it. That's why I'm now studying for my amateur radio exam. It's something I did years ago, and now I've got time to get back into it, because I make all my own antennas and all that sort of stuff. So it's just it just keeps you ticking over, if you like, if that makes sense. I can't just, I don't know, I get bored. I've probably got some form of attention deficit disorder of some description. If somebody really studied me, I probably have.
That'd be an interesting study.
Not something I really want to know about, but that's kind of what it is. If there's something, a lot of the time it's where, as I mentioned before, it's a lot of time where people don't really want to do the thing. I mean, a lot of the jobs that I ended up at Prudential M&G with I had a really good boss there, Lindsay Bateman, the same as same as when working with you. And you gave me challenges to deal with. She did the same thing. Do you fancy having a go at this because it's a bit of a mess? And it's like, and
Well, like after your DC project and after a couple other, evolutions at LeasePlan, I ended up as the group CIO, and the information security office was in shambles. It was just burning. So I'm sorry if anyone's listening who burned what was that burning. But when I got in there, I was like, well, I think I had to maybe beg you a little bit, but like, can you step into information security? Because what
yeah,
I need there is no nonsense, no BS, practical, get it done, get it under control. And you set up that whole department. And so you had to figure out, I think you did some certifications at the time, you've
yeah,
learned it, you got it under control
yeah.
in not too long. You hired the right people. I think some of them are even still there. Um, so I think at that point it was indeed, like, okay, here's a problem that we need someone who we absolutely trust just to get it done, and get it done also in a pragmatic, I don't want to say simplistic way because these are very complex things, but a
No,
pragmatic.
I think that's fair. No, I mean, a lot of the problem was, I mean, um, I won't use her name, but I think we both know who we're talking about. Somebody who was sitting working in that department who was probably getting near being a bit of a genius, frankly, in
Hmm.
terms of the way she looked at things and stuff like that. I was just going to say man after my own heart, but that's wrong. And she was being used effectively as an admin person. And I actually couldn't believe it, frankly. So she became my sort of right hand person, and we looked at it. You let me hire Robin from the UK, if you remember that we, that I've had in the UK. He's another no nonsense person who we needed. But my first point of it was we needed to have a Dutch team in there, because the Dutch regulations on things were very different, and it's a Dutch head office, etc. And even though I was from the UK, I think the basis for it was having a really good Dutch local team. I think really helped me a lot, because it also gave me a bit of protection from certain parts of the business that were not gunning for us exactly, but wanted to overcomplicate things, over audit things, and stuff like that. And then I suppose one of our biggest achievements there was setting up the information security officer group right across 32 companies, and then holding annual meetings of all the information security officers, then putting, the sort of ISMS in, ISO 27001, which was never been used at that company before. One country wanted to invent an extra leg on ISO 27001 that didn't exist, and you didn't really need it, but we let them do that as well, because then they bought the rest of it. So,
Hmm.
so I think there's a lot of compromise involved in it, as long as you don't take your eye off the ball as to what you were originally trying to achieve. So yeah, I mean, I mean, those things. Yeah, I mean, you kind of brought that up. I'd kind of not forgotten about it exactly, but it's just something that you've got in your locker now, isn't it? You do
Well,
it.
after that, I've worked in other banks, other financial institutions.
Yeah.
Right now I'm selling, AI to an Egyptian bank. And and they have a national, their own national bank that, that they need to deal with. And um, I think what I learned from that experience working with you is to look at things in simplicity, and also to look at it to realize that, because you mentioned the word audit, that,
Yeah.
you know, the I think there was some point along the way that we were getting somebody said it was a requirement to have two levels of firewall, and that must be, compliance says it must be two different types of brand of firewall. Now that might make sense in certain cases, But what I remember in that was like, show me where it's written in a government policy that demands this level and this rigor and this investment. And of course, when you chase that down to the actual, regulation of organization control from the Dutch National Bank, is it says have stuff under control. It doesn't anywhere
You
dictate.
remember when we were setting up LeasePlan Bank
Yeah.
that they wanted to blank out all the windows and stuff like that as well
I don't
from
remember that, but
buildings.
I can imagine. Yeah.
So they wanted all the windows tinted so other buildings couldn't see in, and they wanted all the traffic encrypted on the internal network and all the rest of it. It would have cost a fortune and it wouldn't have run properly and nobody would have to see out the window. And it was just mad. It was just people. I mean, one of my qualifications that I'm just retiring from is the CISA qualification, the audit qualification. And when I left the original sort of LeasePlan job, I did the audit qualification so I could argue with auditors,
Mm.
basically, because I'm sitting there and most of the IT auditors that you come across aren't qualified to audit IT. A lot of them, they're actual financial auditors that kind of do a little bit of IT. And you're sitting there saying, well, actually, I'm a qualified IT auditor. You're not. And you're telling me that I need to do this, this,
Yeah.
and this. And I know for sure, here's the audit standards for CISA or, firm IT or whatever it is. And I'm sorry, you're over-egging that somewhat. We don't need to do that. And I think what I learned at M&G and Prudential is that you can over comply with things. You need to meet compliance. But I think it's one of those things where you don't want to be at the bottom, you don't want to be at the top, you want to be in the middle somewhere. So you're comfortable, but you're not over complying, because internal audit's job is supposed to be to improve the business. That's supposed to be their job. But unfortunately, from time to time, it gets to a point is where they're then blockers.
Mhm.
Um, and one of the things that M&G and Prudential that was quite good, it got to a point where audit and well, I made it my mission basically to make sure that we were aligned with audit. So it was making sure that if we were doing something, we'd tell them early and make sure or check in with them first when we were doing something. So they felt part of what we were doing, not kind of having to catch up.
Yeah.
And
No.
we got far less audit findings and everything else than we ever would have done if we hadn't have done that. And I think that's something I learned a little bit from our experience a little bit. Keep them in the loop a bit early on, and then they can't say to you a year down the line, well, you didn't do this or you didn't do that firewall, you didn't, we told you what you were doing or
Yeah.
what we were doing at the time. And I think that's something I learned a little bit about audit.
So let me what I'm going to go towards is the power of the human network to evolve your career. And but before that, I went to junior college in Southern California, where I'm from, and then I got up to Utah. I was originally going to be a finance major, and then an accounting teacher said, well, why are you doing that? Because accounting majors need to know the finance stuff and the accounting, so you learn more. I'm like, oh, okay. But I knew I never wanted to be an accountant. So when PwC and KPMG and Arthur Anderson at the time, I was just like,
sorry, my
Alexa, be quiet.
Off.
And so I knew I didn't want to do that. And then I had some opportunities to play with tech. So I was for a while the Apple on campus rep, which is a fun side job, because I worked in the computer store. And when new Apple stuff came in, I had to demo it and be there and know stuff, which was pretty cool. So basically, the computer store got a paid for, a person.
I remember you were a very big Apple advocate when you arrived when I got to know you.
Yeah, no, still am. And Apple's changed a lot since then, but their stuff just works, which I love. And but I also was able to work in the computer lab for a while, which means we had access to a network for playing Doom. Mostly that's what that meant. And then towards the end, I worked at the Career Center on campus, and it was kind of the same thing as your Yugo story, that they said, well, we have all these machines, 386s and some 486s. It's token ring. We have to go up to the next level of Novell, and they need to be swapped out for Ethernet cards. And I was like, all right, let me see what I can. Let me see what I need to do. And then research, play, try, and came back. All right, well, this is what we need, and I feel I can pull this off. And that was the kind of the first. Maybe similar to you, like, okay, here's a problem to solve.
You want to hear something funny? When I was working in the business at Lease Plan, they had a load of old Commodore PCs, or not compact PCs. And I was throwing them away. So I got 6 of them, and I built a Linux network at home as a hobby because I could, with manual host files and all that sort of stuff. But that's part of my own education, teaching myself stuff, which is same thing really, isn't it?
Well, I think if and I hope they do. I'm wondering what the title of this podcast will be. Is like career advice, maybe from some old codgers. I don't know. But curiosity to go tinker and learn and explore, I think cannot be just underestimated. And then going back to the point that I was setting up with this is, you mentioned a number of times that I had worked with this person. They knew I did good work, and I got invited to do the next thing. And I think there's an element of professionalism there, but also the level of ethics, meaning, hey, Kevin is a trustworthy person who delivers without making it too big and complex and messy. And
it's been said, I must admit, but I kind of try and, I don't know, my wife moans at me all the time for being overly modest at times, where I don't kind of big up things too much, but I'm not, I don't know, it's not in my personality to do that really, and perhaps I should. Perhaps I could be chairman of ICI by now.
Well, I mean, there's power in under promise, over deliver, and there's other people that we've known in our professional lives who they overpromise, underdeliver, and lie. And those people, I think, are not the ones that on the long term succeed. I think taking credit when it's not due and overpromising and fudging is not a sustainable strategy.
What I also think about those people is I try and put myself in that position and wonder how they can live with themselves as well, frankly, because the stress that you must be possibly putting onto yourself by doing that, even unless you are some sort of weird sociopath and you don't realize that you're actually doing it. But I do believe that it induces so much stress into someone if they're not telling the truth about what they're doing, or not telling the truth in general about things. And that must be a very stressful life to lead, I think. I'd rather try and fail and try again than tell people that I've done it and then get to the end and, oh, by the way, it's broken and I haven't done it at all and we've lost all this money or whatever. But I'd rather fess up early on and say, actually, this isn't working, we need to do something else. But yeah, I've had some strange reactions when I've done that in the past, because you're halfway through something and you're saying, hang on a minute, this isn't working right. We need to pivot quick. And strangely, people just want to carry on down the line that they're on, even though it's wrong. And I find that's a bit British as well, actually. You don't quite get that so much in Holland, I don't think. People tend to speak up a bit quicker when things aren't quite right. I think the difference I found with tangent a little bit, but what I found about going to work in Holland was it would take you ages to get something started, but you would already have the buy-in of quite a lot of people because there was more of a consensus in things. Whereas this country, somebody gets an idea, they go, off we go, change direction a few times and just keep, and it didn't really have much, doesn't have much direction to it a lot of the time. Whereas I think that consensus thing is it takes you a long time to get going, and it might be a little bit frustrating, but you've probably got more of a chance of achieving what you wanted to at the end. So it's
Well, I look at it a little bit different, meaning I don't know if there's a better or worse, and I'm
yeah,
assuming the American Anglo is similar to the British Anglo, just improved and upgraded, of course, because it's version 2 and all that. But I think if you talk about resistance to change in the Netherlands, this consensus model is a pre-resistance to change, and then indeed once you get there, and at least in the American model, which I can talk to more, is some authoritative hierarchical decisions made, and then you have a post-decision resistance to change. I'm not sure if the throughput is the time, but you still have to deal with the resistance. Worst case is if you're working in a mixed culture and you have pre and post resistance.
that, didn't we?
That would be So that was the.
That's when we had the what were they called? Bert and the gang. I can't remember what they were called now.
Enterprise architecture. Yeah,
that was it. Yeah, that there. Yeah, that was interesting. That was an interesting relationship, to say the least. You weren't allowed to do anything too quickly in that world without that got too much in terms of planning and stuff like that. You were really you had to plan like 300 years ahead to do anything back then. So I think that was a difficult relationship, I think, that we had there. But I think for me, you mentioned Dutch approach, American approach, British approach. My background's Irish, and I think a lot of the pragmatism and problem solving side of me is, well, all of me, because both my folks were Irish, but I think that's also an Irish thing. They tend to be a little bit no nonsense and stuff like that, and I think that's why. So I think so many companies, startups, and things like that are in Ireland, frankly, because you'll get told fairly quickly what people think of you in Ireland. There are a few chances who we have come across ourselves in Ireland, I must admit. They tend to be in the sort of CEO sphere. But generally, the people that you work with there are problem solvers, but with a bit of a smile on their face as well. So I think it's a different situation, and I do put down a lot of the way I am is being effectively Irish. Really, I was born in England, but got no real English blood. Really, I've got an Irish passport as well, which is good because I can get through queues and EU stuff. It's great, unlike Brexit.
Yeah, I carry both my passports, and it's there's flexibility there. So when I go to Middle East, I typically choose my Dutch passport over my American now. It's not so popular anymore. Let's talk a little bit about managing people, because you and I have both benefited from a bit of a mentorship, if you will. Maybe not that strong of a word, but from Vahid Demi. And Vahid, originally from LeasePlan UK, and then he was the CEO of the group when we were delivering the EuroDC project, and then became CEO of the whole group. I feel the fact that we delivered on that project in the style that we've been talking about was very much possible because of his support as well. Meaning we were able to have those open oh shit moment conversations of and to express stress, and we were not I don't know, there was a sense of calm that I received from working with him like one of the advices he gave me at one point was like, well, if you can do something about it, then don't worry, and if you can't do anything about it, don't worry. Don't worry and get on with it. It's like, stop stressing.
And I think I told you the story about when my mum died, that I was hosting the information security board, and you know what that used to be like. Sometimes you used to get certain people in there saying, are we secure? Well, no, we can never be secure, but we're more secure than we were last month, possibly, or whatever. And about halfway through, because my mum had died not long before, and I was struggling, to be honest. She came back too soon, and Vahi just stopped the meeting and gave me a bit of a hug and told me to go home. So, which was fairly typical Vahi, really. He definitely understood the human aspect of things,
Yeah.
and gave you the room to be a person rather than just a corporate fool, if you like.
Well,
Um,
and before people think Vahid was a pushover and a softie, you know, no, he was tough as nails, and I think very much under his leadership through the 2007 and 8 financial crisis, there was hardly a blip on the results. So hard decisions were made in very human ways,
yeah.
and rallied the troops, and different levers were pulled across the group
Well,
to.
even if you go back before that, when he was FD in the UK, there was an issue at the, um, I suppose, a CEO level in the UK, um, and he took over that business on very short notice and turned that business around as well. That wasn't in a great way when he took it over, and I think that's obviously what led to him becoming the group CEO as well. But he did a great job there because instantly he took it over. There was a different feeling in the business straight away. He would you'd be working
Yeah.
away there and he'd turn up at your desk behind you all of a sudden and things like that. And it's and that was it was. And even I think when he was at head office there, he was quite visible too, wasn't he? I think that was a bit of a step change there, wasn't it? Because your boss man's walking around the office and they're kind of like, oh, you're meant to stay upstairs. So I think that was
Well, I think he was very approachable, but he also had an agent of interaction who was Saskia Voss, who was his executive assistant.
he had one in the UK as well, Natasha, who sadly got killed in a car crash, but
Oof, yeah,
exactly the same. Natasha was his
just this
agent.
the organizational censor to find out
Yep.
what's happening. So I imagine that information security board, Saskia probably whispered in his ear and gave him a heads up on what's happening and what the
Yeah.
scuttlebutt was and things. So, but one of the things that Vahid gave me was the not so much the vision, but the demonstration that leading complex organizations, leading international organizations can be done in a human, humble, empathetic way, and extremely successfully. And so when I was busy with, hey, I want to write this book, and you saw me, sing a song, make a movie, write a book. You were there for the singing
Yep.
part when I sang that.
Well,
As we know, I'm not. I wish my
it
career guidance
impressive.
person. Yeah. So, anyways, I wish the career guidance person would have said never sing, because I'm just glad I was married before I pulled it off. But um, um, write a book was kind of the third thing on that to-do list, and when I was over a couple of years back and mentioned to Vahid over lunch, I want to play with this leadership and love thing, and he's the one who said, we'll go look at Rumi, because he's of course from Persia.
Yep.
Rumi, a 13th century Persian mystic and poet, and I knew Rumi. I had some books around for whatever reason, but I'd never really paid attention to it. And so that was also a real gift. So I want to dive into Rumi a little bit, because one of the fun questions I have is, can you pick out one or two of your favorite and most meaningful Rumi quotes, and even more importantly, why? So do you want to throw one out there?
I have to remember what I sent you now.
Do you want me to read one?
Yeah, read one because I gave you two that I particularly like, and they're both kind of connected a little bit, I think.
Well, I'll read the first one. It's your road and yours alone.
Yeah.
Others may walk it with you, but no one can walk it for you.
Yeah, and that's me starting from where I started from and ended up where I ended up, because I don't think anybody has ever walked that road and can tell you that much about how you can get to that. I think it's my own thing is what I took from that. It's you can, I think you can get advice along the way, but it's still your, I suppose it's your party. Is the way what I saw in that.
I think you gotta take the steps. You got to make the decision. So okay, I'm now going this direction unexpectedly. That door opened, and the decision to cross the threshold into that new adventure can only be made by you. And
it can, but also you have to people around you. I think if the people around you believe in you. Now, every change that I've made, particularly since I met Karen, she's backed me 100% on every change. Of course, you can do that. You can do anything, and it's like, I'm doing this, studying for this exam now. Well, you're going to pass it, and it's nice to have people with faith in you as well, kind of thing, and that helps a lot, because then at least it gives you the, perhaps I can jump, and it's I think that's the love aspect of it for me. If you've got somebody that you love and loves you that thinks you can do it as well, I think that helps you a lot. And that's been a kind of big thing for me over the last 20, well, getting on for 25, 26 years now. So that's been that's helped my confidence, because I'm not by nature, whilst I'm quite a noisy person, I'm not the most confident person underneath. And that drives me on a little bit, because I kind of, it's probably the Irish Catholic bit, but you never think you're doing enough or working hard enough or good enough, or unfortunately the Catholic guilt thing does exist.
And deep, fairly. So
I can tell you, and I'm not, it's, I went to school with a whole bunch of them, so it's pretty, but it's not a bad thing. I think you can be confident and stuff, etc. But I think once you get to a point thinking you're the dogs, whatever's, it's not the way to be. So yeah, that's kind of my thinking of that one. So the love aspect of it for me is having the support to be able to support the path that you're going to take. Because if it's the people around you are going, what? Then it's kind of, I mean, you will get that, of course, but I think if you've got support, it's kind of, there's no bounds to the level of support they're giving you. So you kind of, if it goes horribly wrong, you can say, well, you thought it was okay as well.
Yeah.
But
well, I think also if you have, particularly if it's going to affect home life and whatnot, then having,
well, I mean, as you know, it did massively. And I've got a little funny story about that if you're interested. We had an extension put on our house, and I was away for the whole building situation. There was walls being knocked out, and one of the funniest ones was that the boiler to power the central heat and the hot water system was left outside on one wall just while they were finishing off things, and so Karen was having to deal with that. And then she was, because the place was wide open, she called my brother down one night. She thought she heard somebody wandering around, so he's turned up with a baseball bat and stuff like that. And it was all fine, but she was all left on her own through this massive building project, and I was lucky to survive that one personally. But it is, it is some big sacrifices, but it helped us move on in life as well, So it swings and roundabouts, isn't it? But she supported me all the way through. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to do it. There's that.
Second quote. I'm curious about this one. So when you let go of who you are, you become who you might be.
Yep. I spent a long time through my life and working life, etc., worrying about what I said, what I did, until I kind of, I suppose around the age where I moved into IT, if you like, I then thought, no, I'm going to say what I think, do the right thing. And that's the basis for that for me. I might be something at the end of it, but I'm going to try and just be, like you went back to the ethics thing. My last boss at my previous job, that's one of the things she said openly in a meeting to a board member about the ethics I've got and the values I've got, that she trusts me to do this, this, and this. And I mean, in the end, we didn't really have that many one-to-ones really, because we knew exactly what each other were doing, and she, same as you, trusted me 100%. And I, same with Howard Thomas, and same with Brett. I mean, I don't know if you remember, I did a bit of a LinkedIn post with a list of bosses there a while back,
Mm-hmm.
which I thought was a good thing, because it's nice for people sometimes to be told that. And I work much better if you just leave me to do it. Micromanagement for me is, I can't deal with that at all. And I think once people, because remember when we first met, my previous boss, she said, "Well, I don't know you from Adam. You could be some sort of cowboy." So I'm like, fine, okay. But then we'll start, and then in the end we ended up, with a really good relationship. So and going back, I still talk to team members. I had a meal with Jasper not long ago in the UK. I still talk to people right back from my original job when I left school. So it's going back to your point on networking. Every time I started a new role, I would always find out who I needed to speak to, not necessarily through official channels, but who knew the stuff and knew where the bodies were buried, etc., etc. And every job I've gone into, it's like with LinkedIn. I'm not really using it so much now, but I think I've got over 1,500 people there. I've individually dealt with every single person that's there. I don't accept anything from invitations to people I haven't dealt with. I've dealt with every single person in some way, shape, or form that are on that particular thing. And I think that's how you do it. If people, as you were saying before, if people think you're genuine, but unless you act as yourself, then they don't know whether you're genuine or not, because they don't know who they're dealing with really. If you're different every time somebody deals with you, or I remember working with Morris when we're in Turkey. I mean, we haven't even touched on Turkey and Romania yet, but it was an interesting situation for me, Morris, and the management in Turkey, who were a completely different ballgame altogether. But once you got to know the people on a human level and who to speak to and stuff like that, then it's a bit selfish too, because it makes your life easier too if you do that. I mean, it's really difficult.
How so? What do you mean?
Yeah, well, if you don't understand the culture of where you're working or the people you're working with, it makes your life really difficult, because you really don't know how to approach things. I mean, it's like, I remember working in one job, I got accused of being political. I said, well, I'm not being political. I'm trying to disarm the situation and work on a compromise that we both get maybe 80% of what we want. But if you stick 100% on something, you ain't going to get it 99% of the time. But but that's going back to your overpromise and under promise, over deliver.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then if you shoot for the stars, if you get to the outer atmosphere, you're good. So, and I think that's a lot of it. So yeah, I think it's you can't do anything without understanding the human condition, if you like.
Okay, let's dive into that. Meaning, I frequently tell people that I'm not in the technology business. I'm in the people business who make technology.
I agree. Yep, I agree.
And I'm surprised. I'm constantly surprised at how people are fascinated by that. Like, oh, you mean you're in technology, so you do technology? I'm like, no, technology is a result, and it's interacting with the people. And I also know for sure that the technology will mimic the people. Meaning, if you have a broken, fragmented, not connected group of people, your technology will be the same.
And also, if you've got anything about you as a leader, you surround yourself with the best possible people you can get. And you don't then pretend that you know more than them.
Yeah.
You don't. And I made a big point, particularly in my last job, we used to have regular information security boards and things like that. I would always take a team member in to showcase what they were doing in their particular discipline on a regular basis. Because that's important, because it gives them a bit of a sight of what goes on up the political chain, if you like, and they get some visibility, and it's good for their development basically. And I spent a lot of time in the team that I built from my last employer. There was quite a lot of people like me, if you like, not no degree, not wonderfully educated in terms of paper education, but very bright. And I think 3 or 4 of the management there now are out of my team, who have built themselves up from learning themselves, pragmatic people, very nice people to deal with, except but with a little bit of a sort of steel backbone underneath. They won't be walked over, etc., etc. So I think that's important, that you kind of try and give people a chance, a sort of way to show what they can do, etc. And what really, I think the thing that annoys me the most about people who call themselves leaders taking credit for other people's achievements, that makes me very angry. I can't deal with that. And I've got myself in a little bit of trouble from time to time voicing that in open meetings, because I think it's just disingenuous. It's so wrong. I mean, you don't think that the people sitting there know that you didn't do that? And I find that's again, touching on what you said earlier, that will come home to roost eventually.
It always does. And so whether you voice that and speak that out, or just know that everyone in the room knows the truth, and that will come. Either way, the truth wants to be known. So
I've been in situations where your boss will voice something that somebody else has said, and my normal response to that is, well, you've been working with me for 12, 14 years. I leave you to decide.
Yeah.
and that's it really. The funniest thing, me and my previous boss now have always had a bit of a joke. Sometimes she was so busy, but she sometimes used to dive down into what I'm doing. And my regular thing for her was, I think that's what you're paying me to do. So it used to just make her laugh, and she used to go off and do the more important stuff that she was burdened with, but it was kind of a funny little aside. And when we had a little bit of a thing when I was leaving, and that was one of the things she brought up. She said, it's gonna be horrible not being told that that's what I'm paying Kevin to do anymore. Which is quite funny. But
well, I think if one last little segment before we wrap up. AutomotiveAmerican.com is something that you've been working on for a long time. Ages. Obviously the passion comes from your automotive roots. But what is AutomotiveAmerican.com, and why are you busy with it?
One of the things that I liked when I was at school was history, and I'm a big history buff, but also I'm a big automotive buff as well. So it's a mixture of, as it says, my trials and tribulations with my own 1929 vehicle that's interesting for some people because they go down. There's nothing better than seeing somebody else fail on something they're trying to fix, so you don't go down the same route. So there's quite a bit of that. But there's a lot of history. I've got a bit of an obsession. There's a podcast there somewhere about on a different show that I did about Henry Ford, and I've got a bit of an obsession with Henry Ford in terms of what he did at Ford Motor Company. Some of the other stuff that he did, don't quite agree with, but so I've got a bit of I think it's something we got in common really. Henry Ford with the original vertical integration at the Rouge and all that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of that kind of thing on there. And it's general sort of automotive news, but it's American focused because my passion is American cars and the American automotive industry, because it's interesting. The British one is just as interesting, but I haven't got enough headspace to do both of them.
Mm.
So I've been doing it for such a long time now, but it does okay. I mean, it's it's I'm never going to be a millionaire from it, but it's a nice left brain thing to be doing, I suppose. Is that left brain or right brain? Which is the brain when you think?
I think it's the right creative is, but this is also
Well,
creative, I think. I mean, this isn't
but
only.
it's yeah, it's yeah. There is a bit of creative to it as well. It's a bit of both, and I do. There's some podcast interviews on there, and I do coverage of various car shows and stuff like that on there as well. So it's a bit of a sort of mixture of things, but it's kind of it's evolved over time. There's quite a lot of historical and history type stuff on there now compared to what it used to be. So it's yeah.
So so if we look back at the conversation, um realizing that careers evolve and unfold
Mm.
in unexpected ways, and to be open to those shifts and changes, even though it might take you into a very different place, um, is how careers evolve. Later, we underlie the importance of having the support, family support, as you're taking these steps.
Or is it the way that we think that careers should evolve, and is that being lost now? Would probably be might be a question, perhaps, because I
Go on.
think now you can't get into certain careers by um, being pragmatic or being good at something. You have to take 300 psychometric tests and
Hmm.
this, that, and the other. And I think that's why I said to you earlier about the fact that the government here are lowering the educational requirements to get onto apprentice schemes in companies now, which means they think 10,000 more people will be able to get into various businesses now that were not able to get in there, because we've got an awful problem with people not active in the workforce here, young people, because they can't get into the workplace because they don't meet particular criteria and qualifications. And I'm very pleased that that's been recognised, that will give the likes of me, if you like, a chance to at least get in somewhere and just prove their worth and move on from there. And I think that that's something that organisations should be aware of. I think they're not that there's anything wrong with grads and stuff like that. You have to have a certain sprinkling of grads, but I think you also need pragmatic people, maybe that have worked in different industries and stuff like that. Because I mean, I came from a different industry completely, more of an engineering side of things with a sprinkling of people. But I wouldn't have been able to have done what I've done without having that sort of problem solving mindset, if you like.
Yeah.
So that's something I think that
Well,
organisations need to be aware of.
sure. And hiring managers, I was. This is
Yeah,
very different in the States, at least this, But I've been gone for 20 years or so, but I believe it's still similar, meaning the um, almost merit, meaning if you've demonstrated proficiency in something, um, that I believe is viewed more than just the paperwork. Obviously, if you're medical and some other things, that need,
yeah,
proper education, of course, but I'm talking in general. And then when I came to the Netherlands, I was surprised at how rigid they were looking at the
yeah.
different types of degree.
Germany's the same.
Um, Interestingly, okay, it was a kind of accidental, but I got an MBA from Nairobi, which was one of the top business schools. It's kind of a get out of jail free card in that,
Yeah,
in that. So I walked in as a foreigner from California, and people seem to like that. And then I had this Nairobi card. Um,
that was your MBA, wasn't it?
yeah, and we did some workshops in there and stuff. You've been there
Yeah.
with the castle.
Mhm.
Um, does that make me better or smarter than anyone else? Absolutely not. I just have a piece of paper that's kind of like it's a tick mark, and I hope and I wish that um,
I
maybe
suppose. I mean, out of the degrees and stuff, how many have you got? You've got a few, haven't you?
I have a bachelor degree in accounting and an MBA.
Yeah. So the two of them, the MBA was more useful, do you think, or not? or the probably the financial one during that project probably was handy. I would think probably scared you more than anything else though.
Well, I think the undergraduate bachelor degree was also paper. My first job out of university was sales and telco, and then I went into ERP implementations on financial processes. So where I really learned about finance was implementing financial systems. That's where I really cut my teeth on. Okay, this is, because you had to set up the rules that basically ran the finances for a company
At least you
automatically.
knew the rules from the background though.
Yeah, no, so you know what a balance sheet is, and you know what a P and L, and the general things in accounts receivable, accounts payable, and how those things work for sure. So, but as far as a general background for my career, having a finance and accounting, yeah, I look at investment cases very differently than another CIO or CTO. The MBA, I think that was really because we also did it in Kellogg in Chicago and Stellenbosch, different part of the modules, and meeting people there. I think the network there, because I'm in the Netherlands, is more pronounced. Yeah. So
So, but I think sometimes these days people are not pushed into doing it, but I think there was a situation in this country where everyone had to go to university. So they forgot about all the technical type education and that was all kind of by the by. And then they ran out of engineers and they ran out of plumbers and they ran out of car mechanics and everything else. But everyone had a degree and they're all working at McDonald's.
yeah.
And I think that maybe that's been recognised a little bit. Nothing wrong with that, but unfortunately, there's a friend of mine had a degree. He went to one lecture a week, and that was it. It was a degree in media studies of some description, and they were coming up with degree in hamster shearing or something like that. It was just they were just useless, really. And there's all these colleges were setting up out of nowhere, all of a sudden offering degrees in something or other, and that's it got to the point where everyone had to go to university, and I think hopefully that's changing a little bit now, where they're recognising the fact that apprentice schemes are very useful. They shouldn't call it apprentice schemes either, because I don't think it's the right name for it. It's called apprentice schemes, but what it is you're kind of going into a business at a kind of learning level, but apprentice is probably not the right name for it, because that has a bit of not a stigma exactly, but as a bit of a kind of throwback to what I did in the trades kind of thing. It's not really well, it is a business term now, but they've got to come up with something a bit sexier than that for it, I think. But it's what it needs. I mean, you can bring
I guess it is what it is, though. You come in and you're
okay,
hopefully
yeah.
learning on the job from experts.
Do they have them in Holland?
Not by that name, I don't think. What they do, I guess, well, is have different educational paths for different types of trades. So if you're very academically, scientifically minded, that's kind of a university path, and there's some other more trade and applied paths. The issue I take with that is they choose it like at age 12, and I was an idiot at 12. Like how
I was failing my 11 plus exam at 11.
Yeah, no, exactly. So it's
the other thing for me was I'm a little bit dyslexic in terms of my writing's horrible, and I sometimes invert numbers where I can see something, I know what it is, but I'll say it's 9/5 when I know it's 5/9 or something like that. So it's just it's only a tiny bit, and I'd never use it as an excuse for anything. But because I know about it, I have to be doubly careful, and particularly when I'm doing this exam work, it's multi-choice questions, and you've obviously got two that are Well, one's right, one's nearly right, and the other two are bull. And you've got to be very careful with the one that's nearly right because it's very similar and the numbers are around the other way or the formula's slightly different. And, I've had to relearn Ohm's law and things like that.
Mm.
I haven't done that for a long time. so that's been good. So it's been good to keep the almost 66-year-old brain matter working. Has been quite good. So,
Well, if you talk about dyslexia and neurodiverse type, ways of thinking and experiencing the world, I think what you've done is you found a way to work with it. I think you became aware of it, and you pay attention to it, and you get on with it. So
I think it's the learning side of it's the thing. I have to find a way to a learning method that I can work with. I can't learn the same as a lot of other people, and I've done for this amateur. I keep going back to that, but it's most education I've done for a while. But I've done two lots of courses on it. One was a live Zoom one with a group of people, and they go through the slides and all this, that, and the other, and chat about it, which was okay, but they're slightly veering off the subject. I'm not there to listen to the bibble. I want to study. The other one is where I get a module every 3 or 4 days. There's a video, there's some reading material. I have the book. So I go through it, and at the end of it, there's a test. So I look at it, make sure I get the test right. Then I get the next module a couple of days later. It's all on me. It's me that's doing it. Perfect. Me, that is. But the other thing in the classroom, effectively, hated it. Even when I was at school, I used to be the one at the back that was messing around because I didn't understand what they were talking about a lot of the time because they weren't teaching it in a way that I understood. But they've got a class of 30 people. They don't go out of their way to understand that I'm slightly different in the way I want to learn. I'm not unique, I'm sure, by any stretch of the imagination, but I think that's something that's a problem as well, because obviously in this country with finances and stuff, classes are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So I think people are getting left out more than they did before. So they get to the end of their schooling and, oh, he's an idiot. He's not going anywhere. And I had 1 or 2 teachers that taught me when I was younger who thought I was an idiot. And I probably am in some respects, but
well, we all are in some respects, but it's my hope is with AI, as a it gives people superpowers and it's very liberating. That
great when you're writing a letter to your MP and you do it in your own inimitable style and throw it in there and say, right, I need this message to go across to my MP. How would you do it? I get it back and it's like, well, that's really good. That goes off to the MP.
Yeah.
Because that can express itself better than I can. So that's fine. But it's my idea. And what I keep saying to people, they keep saying, oh, AI, this, AI, that. You have to have the idea to ask the questions of the AI. If you don't have the idea, then the AI doesn't know. And that's always going to be the case. No matter what, it can learn, whatever. It won't ever be able to learn the way you're thinking to do a particular thing. No matter how good it gets, it's never going to be able to do that. It's still, Kevin wants to know the history of this, that, and the other in these years, and what was the angle on this particular thing that happened. No one else is going to ask it that. And I think that's
and when I talk to people in management and stuff about the impact of this is I think it's inverting I'm not sure what structure it is, but in the past where a manager was kind of the person who knew stuff and we told you how to do stuff, and now the know stuff and how to do stuff is actually in the machine. And so then it's more the question is like, well, how to ask the question? I think it's to have the wisdom of asking the right question at the right time, so then the machine can go off and do stuff.
And also, it hopefully deals with that situation where people are not good managers, but get by on the fact that they know particular things that other people don't know. And that gives them a certain amount of power. But they now need to be able to manage people or actually manage and make decisions based on their own decision making abilities,
It's
their own knowledge.
it's going to be
I think it's going to expose. I think it'll expose a lot of people as well, which I think is about in certain cases long overdue, as I'm concerned, because there are a lot of people with the title manager who couldn't manage.
no, exactly. So Kevin Flood, in the show notes, I will put your LinkedIn link, automotiveamerican.com. I'll put that link in there as well. A lot of interesting things in there
Well,
about.
if anybody's interested, what I have had a little bit is colleagues that I've worked with, and friends of colleagues that I've worked with little management issues at work and stuff. That because before I left my current role, I've been a mental health first aider for quite a while. And I helped quite a lot of people that were having work problems and stuff outside as much as you can. You can't counsel. You can take it to a point and signpost people to the right, paths and stuff. But that was a really good thing we had it where I used to work. We had a bunch of mental health first aiders, and from time to time, when you were having quite a lot of stuff to deal with, you'd have to go and talk to one of the other mental health first aiders about some of the stuff that you were hearing from some of the other people. But so I found that pretty rewarding because you were able to use your own experience a little bit and empathy, if you like, in terms of helping other people as well. But no, if anybody sees it and has got any thoughts about some of the stuff we were banging on about that might find useful.
So on LinkedIn, when it said in really bold letters "retired,"
yeah,
it's kind of like almost retired then.
I'm retired from corporate life. But if anybody wants a little bit of help or something like that, it's not, I'm not against pro bono stuff. If people need a little bit of advice, I mean, we've exchanged a bit here and there, haven't we? When you give me some advice and stuff, and vice versa. And I'm always open to doing that because I don't think you can ever shut yourself off completely and not share stuff. Even like most might be just rubbish.
No, great. And you can find Kevin on LinkedIn or get in touch with me and I can get you in touch. What I find refreshing about asking Kevin for help is it's usually if I'm looking for some sort of no nonsense voice of reason and realizing that my brain is overcomplicating this, and like, hey, if you talk to Kevin, and you can kind of cut through that a lot very easily.
Too simplistic sometimes, perhaps, but
well, it's I appreciate everything we've done over the years, and also thank you for way back in the day mentioning that word podcast to me, and this is part of that evolution.
I've been asked a couple of times because one of the there's a chap in the UK here. He's the only real distributor of parts for my 1929 car, and he stumbled upon my podcasts and stuff that are linked on the website, and he said, I really enjoyed listening to him. Are you going to do any more? And I haven't done any for quite a long time, so now I've got a bit of time. I might dip my toe back in doing that. So what I used to do was find people in the British sort of classic car world and just shoot, as we were doing, really shoot the breeze for an hour about state of things and got into it and all that sort of stuff. So I might look at that again. There's some, if anyone's interested, there's quite a few of the old podcasts are linked on there as well. But so I've got time now because the problem I had with it, which you'd probably find as well, it depends on. I used to be a bit over the top with my editing. I used to edit out ums and ahs and coughs and bits and pieces. So it used to take me hours to edit them. So, and I was working as well, and I kind of ran out of energy, really. That's why I stopped doing it. So I may very well go back to it again.
As my listeners will complain to you about, I don't do any of that. I leave it very.
That's the style now, though. I think they're very much. It's a bit like YouTube now. You've got people who've got their main YouTube channel that's all edited and bells and whistles, and then they have their raw channel. And if you look at the views, there's more views for the raw channel than there is for the magnum opus of the bloody main channel, which they, but there's more. People are more interested in just the people rather than the ums and ahs and bits and pieces. So no, definitely. watch this space, I suppose. I don't really
Watch
know
the
where I
space.
might veer off to next.
We'll watch the automotiveamerican.com space and then check out some of the old podcasts and maybe some of the new podcasts. So Kevin Flood, thank you so much.
Thanks, Chris. It's always great for us to chat. We always find out new things to talk about one way or another. Thank you once again.
Thank you for listening. Visit ebullient.com. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast on your favorite player.